"Don't forget your nephew's birthday," my mother texted me, "dress nicely and bring a real gift." That was the first thing she said to me a week after my whole family skipped my daughter's 5th birthday. No apology, no excuse, not even the fake kind. Just an order like my little girl sitting in that party room for 2 hours, waiting by the window, had never happened. I'm Evan, 34, and for most of my life I was the one people called when they needed something handled. I remembered birthdays, booked tables, picked up extra food, smoothed things over when someone got offended, and made sure nobody left family gatherings mad. I used to think that made me dependable. Looking back, it just made me useful. So when my daughter turned 5, I did what I always do. I planned everything myself. I rented a small room at a kids' play place, ordered the cake she wanted, hung up the decorations, packed the goodie bags, and sent every invite early so nobody could pretend they forgot. Everyone said they'd be there. Every single one of them. Nobody came. Not one car pulled in. Not one text came through saying they were sorry. My daughter kept asking if they were running late, and I kept lying, because that felt easier than telling a 5-year-old the truth. A week later, my mother sent that message about my nephew's birthday, like my daughter was supposed to disappear on command so her grandson could have the spotlight. I stared at the screen, opened my banking app, sent $10, and added one line. "I won't be there. Consider this my gift. If you've ever been treated like family only when someone needed something from you, subscribe, because that was just the beginning." The next morning, the campaign started. My mother Diane called before 8, the kind of early call people make when they want you off balance before your coffee even cools. I let it ring twice, then picked up because I already knew she would not stop. She did not say hello. She did not ask about Sadie. "Did you really send me $10? She asked. Her voice had that sharp, breathless edge she gets when she wants to sound wounded and righteous at the same time. I leaned against the kitchen counter and watched Sadie at the table, with her cereal humming to herself, while she lined blueberries along the rim of the bowl. I kept my voice low. "Yes, you humiliated me." "No," I said. I declined an invitation. She made a sound like I had slapped her through the phone. "You sent money with a note, Evan. Do you know how insulting that was?" I almost laughed, but I was too tired for that. "You texted me an order, not an invitation. You told me how to dress and what kind of gift to bring, and you managed to do all of that without saying one word about my daughter." She ignored the last part completely. That was her favorite trick. If a fact made her look ugly, she stepped around it like it didn't exist. "Owen is turning 6. It's an important family day. Kyle and Brittany have gone to a lot of trouble, and now I have to explain why you acted like a child." I turned away from Sadie and lowered my voice even more. "You can explain that I'm staying home." "That is not enough," she snapped. "You embarrassed me. Your brother saw the transfer. Brittany saw it. I had to show your father because I honestly couldn't believe my own son would stoop that low." There it was. Not concern, not hurt. Reputation. Audience. She was not upset because I had disappointed her. She was upset because other people had seen it. I said, "You had no problem letting everyone see that nobody in this family could make time for Sadie." My mother went quiet for half a second, then came back colder. "You need to stop weaponizing that party." Weaponizing. My little girl had waited in a decorated room while every chair stayed empty, and somehow I was the one turning it into a weapon. "I'm not weaponizing anything I said. I'm remembering it." "You always do this," she said. "You take one disappointment and turn it into a morality play where you get to be the victim." I gripped the edge of the counter. There were 100 things I could have said right then, but years of dealing with her had taught me that once she reached that tone, facts stopped mattering. "I have to get Sadie ready," I said. "No, you're going to listen to me. You are going to send a proper gift, and you are going to call your brother today. You will not make this family look divided over something so petty." Something so petty. That was how she framed it. My daughter's birthday was petty. Her grandson's party was family business. "I'm not going," I said. Then I ended the call. I barely had time to slip my phone into my pocket before it started buzzing again. This time, it was my father, Russell. He rarely called first. He preferred to arrive after my mother had already decided what the official version was, then act like the voice of reason while repeating every word she put in his mouth. "Dad," he sighed heavily, like I had inconvenienced him by existing. "What the hell are you doing?" It was almost impressive how fast the family had moved. Less than 15 minutes, and now we were at open hostility before breakfast. "I'm making breakfast," I said. "What do you think I'm doing?" "You know exactly what I mean. Your mother is in tears." That almost made me look at the ceiling. My mother cried strategically. My father always delivered those updates like courtroom evidence. "She'll live," I said. There was a short silence, and when he spoke again, his voice dropped into that flat, warning tone I remembered from high school. "You need to fix this before Saturday." "Fix what?" "The disrespect." I picked up Sadie's lunchbox from the counter and started packing apple slices into a container, mostly to give my hands something to do. Nobody disrespected her when they skipped her birthday. That is not the issue. Of course it's the issue. No, he said sharper now. The issue is that your brother and his wife are hosting a family event, and instead of acting like an adult, you chose to make a scene. "Dad, I sent $10 and declined." "You sent $10 to your own mother like she was a charity jar." I let out a slow breath. "Did she also tell you she texted me to demand a valuable gift after ignoring my kid for a week?" He took the question and crushed it without answering. "Kyle works hard. Brittany works hard. They're trying to do something nice for Owen. Not everything is about you." "Sadie isn't me," I said. "That party was for her." My father's tone changed then, not softer but more dismissive, like he had decided logic was pointless, and now he was going to deal in hierarchy. "Listen to me carefully. You are not going to punish this family because your feelings got hurt." I had said some version of "my feelings are not the point" for years, and every time it got translated into Evan is being dramatic again. So I said something simpler. "I'm not discussing it anymore." He laughed once without humor. "You think you can just pull away whenever you don't get your way?" That sentence stuck because it was so backward. I was the one who never pulled away. I was the one they called when a reservation got messed up, when someone needed a ride to the airport before sunrise, when somebody's rent was short, when a child needed last-minute babysitting, when Thanksgiving got too tense and someone needed to smooth it out before the cousins noticed. But according to my father, I was the one abandoning people. "I have to go," I said. "If you keep doing this," he said, "don't expect people to forget it." Then he hung up like that was supposed to land as a threat. After I dropped Sadie off at kindergarten, my phone lit up with a text from my younger brother Kyle. "Real classy, man." I stood in the school parking lot, with my keys in my hand, and stared at the screen. No greeting. No mention of Sadie. Just instant sarcasm, like he had been waiting for his chance to swing. I typed back, "Your son had a birthday invite with instructions attached. My daughter had empty chairs." His response came so fast he had to have been holding the phone already. "You're still on that. Still on that." Like I was obsessing over a restaurant mix-up, not the fact that my 5-year-old sat in a party dress asking if traffic was bad. I wrote yes. Another bubble appeared. "Mom said you were acting weird, but I didn't think you'd go this far. It's a kid's party. You really couldn't just show up and be normal for 2 hours." I looked around the lot at parents buckling toddlers into car seats, carrying backpacks, waving goodbye through windows. Everything looked ordinary, and there I was standing in the middle of a school morning, trying to explain basic decency to my own brother. I typed, "Did you tell me you weren't coming to Sadie's party?" A pause, then something came up. I stared at those 3 words and felt something old and familiar rise in me. Not fresh anger, recognition. Something came up was family code for your event didn't matter enough to deserve honesty. I wrote, "Nobody even texted." Kyle sent back, "You're making this bigger than it was." That was the line. Always. If they hurt you, the second offense was objecting to it. I didn't answer him after that. And maybe that annoyed him, because a few minutes later, another message came in. Owen doesn't deserve to be dragged into your issues with Mom. That was interesting because I had not said one word about Owen. I had not blamed a 6-year-old for having a birthday. But once again, the story had already been rewritten. In their version, I was attacking a child. In reality, I was refusing to perform gratitude on command. When I got back to my car, another name flashed onto my screen. Brittany. My sister-in-law had never been direct unless she needed something or wanted to keep her own hands clean. If Kyle was the one who threw punches, Brittany was the one who stood slightly behind him and explained later why everyone had made her do it. I answered on the 4th ring. "Hey," she said brightly, as if we were planning brunch. "I just wanted to clear the air." I said nothing. She kept going. "I know there's some tension right now, and honestly, I think a lot of this is just crossed wires." "There are no crossed wires," I said. "Your family skipped my kid's birthday, then my mother texted me to tell me what kind of gift I should bring your son." Brittany exhaled softly into the phone. "Okay. See, that's exactly what I mean. It wasn't like that." "How was it?" She was trying to make sure the day felt special. I laughed once. "For who?" "For Owen," she said. "He's been excited for weeks." There it was again. Her son's anticipation counted. Sadie's did not. "So was my daughter," I said. "I know," Brittany replied, but she said it too quickly, too lightly, like she was checking a box. And I do feel bad that things got messy. Things got messy. Not we missed it. Not we let her down. Things got messy. "You didn't come," I said. There was a short pause. "Kyle had a work issue." "You didn't text." "I assumed your mom did." "She didn't." "Well, I'm sorry if communication fell through. Sorry if..." Another family classic. "Why are you calling Brittany?" I asked. Her tone tightened almost imperceptibly. "Because I think it would be really sad if the cousins started growing up with tension because adults couldn't move on from one bad weekend." "Adults," meaning me. "My daughter is 5, I said. "She doesn't need tension. She needs adults who keep their word." Brittany went quiet for a moment, then tried another angle. "Look, Kyle's upset. Your parents are upset. Owen keeps asking if Uncle Evan and Sadie are coming. I just think it would say a lot if you could be the bigger person." That phrase hit exactly the way it always had, like a hand reaching for my wallet. Be the bigger person meant absorb this cover for us and make sure no one else had to feel uncomfortable. "I've been the bigger person for years," I said. She gave a little dismissive laugh. "Come on." "No," I said. "I'm serious. When your basement flooded, who spent his Saturday hauling boxes and ripping out wet drywall?" She didn't answer. "When Kyle's truck was in the shop, who drove him back and forth for 4 days?" Still nothing. "When your sitter canceled, who kept Owen overnight on 2 hours' notice?" Her voice came back cooler. "That has nothing to do with this." "It has everything to do with this," I said. "Because every time you needed something, I was family. Every single time. But when it was Sadie's turn to matter, suddenly everybody got busy. I expected anger. What I got instead was that frosty, offended tone people use when they have been forced to look bad and resent you for making it visible." "That's not fair," Brittany said. I was too tired to argue the definition of fair. "I have work," I said. "Good luck on Saturday." Then I hung up. By noon, the messages had spread sideways through the family tree like a spill. My Aunt Linda sent, "Your mother is heartbroken." My cousin Matthew wrote, "Dude, $10 was harsh." My father's sister messaged me a paragraph about how family events require grace, especially for the children. One second cousin I barely heard from wrote, "Don't make the kids pay for adult drama." What fascinated me was how coordinated the framing already was. No one asked what happened. No one said, "Hey, I heard there was tension. Are you okay?" They all arrived with conclusions pre-packaged. By lunchtime, I was not a father who set a boundary. I was a bitter man punishing his nephew to spite his mother. That was how it always worked. The first injury was private. The second part was public relations. I muted 3 group chats and went back to work, but I couldn't stop the old inventory from opening in my head. There was the year Kyle lost his apartment because he spent half his savings on a truck he could not afford, and I covered his deposit so he would not end up sleeping on our parents' couch. There was the 4th of July. My parents insisted on hosting for the extended family, even though they had no plan. I took a day off work, hauled rental chairs, bought ice, set up the grill, assembled canopies in humid heat, then stayed late, breaking everything down while my father sat in a lawn chair talking about how much work hosting was. There was Brittany's baby shower, which my mother insisted had to be elegant. Guess who spent his lunch breaks picking up centerpieces because my mother found a florist, but not transportation? Guess who assembled favors in the garage while everyone else posted photos of themselves getting ready? There was my mother's kitchen remodel, where she swore she only needed advice. Advice turned into weekends. Weekends turned into me painting cabinets, driving to hardware stores, and returning the wrong fixtures. And every single time I told myself the same thing. This is what family does. You show up. You help. You don't keep score. That line sounds noble until you realize everyone else is keeping score just fine. They're just only counting what you owe them. That afternoon, my mother texted again. I hope you're happy. People are shocked by your behavior. Not hurt. Not sad. Shocked. There was always an audience with her. I replied, I'm working. She sent back, maybe spend some of that energy learning gratitude. I did not answer. An hour later, Kyle called again. This time I let it go to voicemail. He left one anyway, his voice tight and sarcastic. Hey man, just wanted to say thanks for making Owen's birthday about your personal issues. Real mature. Mom's been trying to keep this family together and you keep pulling this crap. Call me when you decide to act like my brother again. Act like my brother again. When I picked Sadie up that afternoon, she came running out with marker on one hand and a paper sun glued to a blue construction sheet. She was talking before she even reached me, telling me about a class game about snack time, about how her teacher said her picture had great energy. Kids move forward so naturally when no one teaches them to sit inside a wound. For a few minutes in the parking lot, I almost forgot the buzzing in my pocket. Then she said, Daddy, Grandma didn't call today. I looked down at her. Were you expecting her to? She said she wanted to talk about birthdays. That stopped me cold for half a second. So my mother had talked to her already, and of course she had not mentioned that to me. What did she say exactly? I asked, keeping my tone light. Sadie shrugged and adjusted the straps of her little backpack. She asked if I like cake more or ice cream more. Then she said cousins have to celebrate each other. Cousins have to celebrate each other. I buckled her into the back seat and shut the door a little too carefully. My mother had skipped my daughter's birthday, then called her afterward to start planting lines in her head about family obligation. She did not need time to feel guilty because guilt was not in the room. Control was. After dinner, after bath time, after she fell asleep with one sock half off and her stuffed rabbit under one arm, I sat on the couch in the dark with my phone in my hand and read back through the messages from that day. Every one of them had the same structure. Your mother is hurt. Your brother is upset. Owen is innocent. Why are you being difficult? Why can't you let this go? Why are you doing this to the family? Not one message asked what it had felt like for Sadie to wait. That was when it finally settled into focus. This was not fallout. This was enforcement. The family story had a shape, and my job had always been to fit inside it. I was useful, dependable, stable, the one who absorbed inconvenience so everyone else could keep calling themselves close. The second I stopped doing that, they identified the breach and moved to contain it. My mother led with guilt. My father backed her with authority. Kyle added mockery. Brittany polished it into reason. The extended family supplied pressure from the sides, so the whole thing would feel bigger than it was. Around 9:30, my phone lit up one more time. Another text from my mother. If you refuse to come, at least don't poison Sadie against this family. She deserves better than your bitterness. I read it twice, then set the phone face down on the coffee table and stared at nothing for a long time. That was how far they had gotten in less than one day. I had declined a birthday invitation, and now I was already being positioned as the parent who might damage his own child out of spite. The accusation wasn't random. It was groundwork. I picked the phone back up and typed one sentence. "Leave my daughter out of this." Then I turned the sound off, locked the screen, and sat there listening to the dishwasher hum in the kitchen, feeling the house go still around me. For the first time, I stopped thinking about whether they were being unfair. I started thinking about how far they were willing to go. A few days later, they stopped pretending. Sadie's kindergarten was hosting a Friday afternoon family showcase, one of those small school events that sounds casual until you realize it matters a lot if you're 5. The kids would show their art, sing 2 short songs, and drag their parents around the room to explain projects that mostly involved glitter paper plates and enormous effort. Sadie had been talking about it since Monday. She wanted the yellow cardigan with the tiny white buttons because her teacher once told her it made her look sunny. She wanted me there early. She wanted me to see the mural her table had made. By then, I had learned not to mistake silence for peace, so when my mother went quiet for 2 days, I did not relax. I just paid attention. Friday came. I left work early, picked Sadie up, took her home to change, and got her back to school with 10 minutes to spare. She was buzzing the whole drive talking about the songs and the snacks. Inside, the multi-purpose room was full of folding chairs, poster boards, and parents holding paper cups of weak coffee. Teachers were trying to direct traffic without looking like they were directing traffic. Kids ran in short, excited circles until somebody caught them and pointed them back toward their class section. Sadie grabbed my hand and pulled me toward the kindergarten display wall. "Mine is over here," she said. Then I heard my mother laugh. It was that polished, public laugh of hers, the one she used anywhere she wanted people to read kindness onto her face before she had to prove it. I turned, and there they were. My mother stood near the classroom door with a tray of store-bought sugar cookies balanced in both hands, like she had baked them herself. Beside her was my father, Russell, wearing the same mild smile he used when he wanted to look approachable without warmth. My younger brother, Kyle, stood a little behind them, with one hand in his pocket, already scanning the room, like he expected conflict and planned to enjoy it. Brittany was there too, one arm around Owen while he swung a plastic dinosaur by the tail. My daughter let go of my hand and lit up. "Grandma," she ran before I could stop her, and my mother lowered the tray just enough to open one arm dramatically. Sadie crashed into her, and my mother bent down with a smile big enough for the room. "There's my sweet girl," she said loud enough for nearby parents to hear. That was the first thing she stole from me that afternoon. Context. Anyone watching would have seen a loving grandmother greeting her granddaughter at a school event. No one would have guessed she had skipped that same child's birthday and then spent the week trying to shame me into attending her grandson's party. My father patted Sadie's shoulder once like he was checking a box. Kyle gave her a quick smile. Brittany crouched to say hello in that bright voice some adults use with children when other adults are watching. Owen announced that the dinosaur was a T-Rex, not a dragon, which apparently mattered a lot. I walked over slowly, trying to decide whether the right move was to say something or let the school event stay a school event for a few more minutes. My mother straightened and looked at me like she had just happened to find me there. "Evan," she said, "I was wondering if you'd make it." It was a tiny sentence, easy to miss cruel if you knew the language. "Not nice to see you. Not we came for the kids." She had already started laying track. "This is Sadie's school event," I said. "Of course I'm here." She smiled without blinking. "Well, sometimes work comes first for people." I looked at her for a second. Not today. If that landed, she did not show it. She turned to one of the mothers standing nearby, a woman with a volunteer sticker on her sweater. "My granddaughter has been talking about this all week," my mother said warmly. "We wouldn't miss it." The volunteer smiled politely. She did not know that we had apparently come with a selective definition. Sadie had already started tugging at Brittany's sleeve, asking if Owen wanted to see the mural. I stepped closer. "Did anyone tell you that you were invited?" I asked my mother quietly. My father answered before she could. This is a family event at a school, not a private club. That wasn't my question. My mother tilted her head slightly. I'm her grandmother. You're also someone who's been contacting my daughter directly. Her expression shifted just a fraction, then smoothed again. I called my granddaughter. That is not a crime. School isn't the place, I said. Finally, something we agree on, she replied. The performance started in earnest once the kids lined up for their songs. The teacher, Ms. Alvarez, asked families to sit while the class gathered on a strip of blue tape at the front of the room. Sadie looked for me immediately, and I raised my hand so she could find my face. She smiled, settled, then sang with that fierce 5-year-old concentration that turns every school song into a major event. Half the class mumbled. One child waved through the entire first number. Then I heard my mother behind me whispering to somebody. She's so bright, she said. I just worry sometimes. Evan carries so much stress and kids pick up on that. I didn't turn around right away. I let the sentence land in full. Not an insult. Something cleaner. Concern shaped like accusation. If you called her on it, she could claim she was speaking from love. After the songs, the class moved back toward the project tables. Parents and relatives spread out across the room, following children to posters and cardboard displays. Sadie pulled me straight to a mural her table group had made with tissue paper flowers and cotton ball clouds. Look, she said, pointing to a crooked yellow shape in the corner. That one's mine. Ms. Alvarez said the sun can be anywhere if the picture still feels warm. It does feel warm, I said. She grinned and launched into a full explanation of who made which flower and why the clouds were not supposed to look like popcorn, even though one of them definitely did. I was listening when my mother drifted up beside us with the tray of cookies she no longer needed to carry. Oh, this is beautiful, she said. Sadie always gets her creativity from our side. I ignored that and asked Sadie another question about the mural. My mother stayed there anyway, because leaving a scene before she controlled it had never been one of her strengths. Ms. Alvarez came over a moment later. You must be Sadie's family, she said. I'm her dad, I answered. And I'm her grandmother, my mother added quickly. Ms. Alvarez nodded. She's had such a good week. Really thoughtful, very expressive. My mother put one hand lightly against her chest. That means so much. We all care about her very deeply. We all. My mother turned to her with that same gentle concern I had heard during the songs. I just hope she's not picking up too much tension at home. Children are so sensitive, aren't they? That did it. I looked directly at her. Don't. Ms. Alvarez glanced between us, smile fading. My mother widened her eyes slightly. I'm only saying she's a sensitive little girl. And I'm saying don't do this here. My father appeared a second later. Lower your voice, he said. I had not raised it. But that line was never about volume. It was about positioning. Sadie was still focused on the mural, thank God. But Ms. Alvarez was no longer pretending not to notice. She cleared her throat gently and said, Would anyone like to see the reading corner? The kids made bookmarks. It was an elegant exit, and I was grateful for it. Sadie grabbed my hand. Come on. I went with her. So did my mother. That was the next thing she did all afternoon, attach herself to whatever path Sadie chose, always half a step behind or beside, never enough to provoke a public scene, always enough to claim space. She praised the bookmark. She handed Sadie a napkin when frosting got on her finger. She asked Owen to stand next to Sadie for a photo with the cousins, then called me over as though we were all one happy branch of one healthy tree. I said no to the photo. She looked surprised for the benefit of the room. Kyle finally joined us near the book bins. You could try not being difficult for one afternoon, he muttered under his breath. I kept my eyes on Sadie. You could try not needing Mom to fight your battles in a kindergarten classroom. He gave a short smile. You really think everybody doesn't see what you're doing? What am I doing? Making everything weird because you got in your feelings over one missed party. I turned to him then. You did miss it. His jaw tightened. I said something came up. That doesn't answer why nobody could text. Brittany stepped in before he could answer. Can we not do this in front of the kids? I'm fine not doing this at all, I said. You all seem to have trouble with that. Kyle laughed under his breath. God, you love this. Love what? This. Being the wounded guy. Acting like everybody's out to get you. In our family, the person naming the problem always became the problem. The one who objected was the one creating tension. The one who remembered was the one refusing peace. I looked at him and said, I'm here for my daughter. So are we? My mother cut in smoothly. No, I thought. You are here for the witnesses. The event moved into the snack portion after that, which meant clusters of adults, paper plates, and children on a sugar rush. I kept Sadie close without making it obvious. Every few minutes my mother tried to insert herself again, always with an audience nearby. Sadie, sweetheart, tell them about the song you practiced for us. Sadie, honey, did you show your grandpa the flower you made? Sadie, maybe we'll do cupcakes at our house next time. That last one made me look up. Sadie looked at her, then at me, uncertain in the quick way children get when two grown-up realities don't line up. My mother smiled. For your cousin's birthday tomorrow. Remember, we talked about it. I stepped in before Sadie could answer. She won't be there. The smile stayed on my mother's face, but her eyes cooled. I wasn't asking you. Yes, you were, I said. Whether you like it or not. My mother bent slightly toward Sadie and softened her voice. I know you were excited to see your cousin's party decorations. That was a lie, or close enough to one that it made no difference. Sadie had not been excited. She had been confused because her grandmother had called and floated ideas at her like plans already made. I crouched to Sadie's level. Go show Ava your bookmark again, okay? She hesitated, then nodded and ran toward the reading corner. The second she was out of earshot, I stood up. You don't make plans with my daughter through my daughter, I said. My mother's expression flattened. I am not some stranger. No, I said. You're someone who thinks being family means you don't need permission. My father stepped forward. That's enough. No, I said, keeping my voice low. It's not. You don't get to rewrite this in front of her teachers and act like I'm the unstable one because I won't play along. Brittany folded her arms. No one said you were unstable. My mother said softly, I said you seemed stressed. There it was again. The cleaner, prettier knife. I looked at her and understood something all the way through for the first time. She was not improvising. This was a plan. Show up, charm the room, make contact with Sadie, leave just enough concern about me floating in the air that if anything bigger happened later, other adults would already have a version of me filed away in their heads. I said, you need to stay away from my daughter unless I say otherwise. My mother gave a small, incredulous laugh. In a room full of people, really? Evan, Kyle shook his head. Listen to yourself. Actually, I said I am. That was the one thing they hated most. Not anger, clarity. The rest of the event passed in a tense, controlled haze. I did not leave because I would not let them push me out of my daughter's day, and I did not engage more than necessary because the school was not my battlefield. My mother made one last pass at Ms. Alvarez near the coat hooks, thanking her for all she did for Sadie, and adding that family support was everything when single parents had so much on their shoulders. She said it warmly, exactly the tone designed to make criticism sound like sympathy. I collected Sadie's backpack, thanked Ms. Alvarez myself, and walked us out before anyone could stop me. In the parking lot, Sadie skipped toward the car for 3 steps, then slowed. Daddy. Yeah. Is Grandma mad at you? The question was so direct that for a second, all I could do was unlock the car. Why would you ask that? She makes the smile she makes when she's mad, Sadie said. I looked at her. 5 years old, and already noticing things grown adults thought they were hiding. I opened the back door and helped her in. Grown-ups can have their own feelings, I said carefully. That part is not your job. She thought about that while I buckled her seatbelt. Okay, she said. Then after a pause, Grandma said tomorrow would be extra fun, because there'd be a bounce house and a blue cake and maybe a magician. There it was. Not a vague mention. A full sales pitch. What else did she say? Sadie looked down at her shoes. She said cousins should be together for birthdays. On the drive home, she asked for fries, so I said yes. We sat in a booth at a place with sticky tables, and she dipped one fry at a time into ketchup, while telling me which classmates sang the loudest. After dinner, while she colored at the coffee table, my phone buzzed with a text from Brittany. "You did not need to make that awkward at school." I stared at it for a moment, then put the phone down. A minute later, it buzzed again. Owen heard tension and asked questions the whole way home. Then a third. "Kyle is furious," I replied once. "Your family brought private pressure into a kindergarten event. Don't do that again." She read it immediately and did not answer. That silence lasted maybe 20 minutes. Then Kyle called. I answered the third time because ignoring him did not make him calmer. It only made him louder. What I said, "What the hell was that today? You showed up to my daughter's school function and used it to push your son's party. That is not what happened. Then why was Mom pitching tomorrow to Sadie?" He made an angry sound. "She was being nice. She was working around me." "You are impossible," he said. "Mom was trying to include your kid after you made things weird." I smiled at that, though there was no humor in it. "That's the line now." "It is weird," he shot back. "You're acting like we committed some crime because plans changed one day." "One day," I repeated. "You really think that's what this is?" "Yeah, I do. I think you're pissed because the world did not stop for one party, and now you're embarrassing everybody because Mom called you out." I said, "Tell me something honestly. If nobody had shown up for Owen, and then a week later Mom told you to bring a real gift for Sadie, would you call that normal?" He did not answer right away. Then he said, "That's hypothetical." "No," I said. "That's perspective." He exhaled hard. "I'm not doing this all night." Brittany was embarrassed. Mom was embarrassed. Dad says you're spiraling, and honestly, I'm starting to agree. There it was. My mother's school performance line had already become family language. "I'm setting a boundary," I said. "You're blowing up relationships. Maybe relationships shouldn't depend on me swallowing everything." He laughed once. "That's dramatic. I learned from the best." He swore under his breath and hung up. I had just put the phone down when it lit again, my mother this time. "You humiliated me in front of teachers." I typed back, "You came to my daughter's school to keep this going." Her reply landed almost instantly. "We came because we love her. You are the one making every act of kindness look ugly." That was the deepest part of the trap with people like her. They do not just do harmful things. They wrap those things in gestures the rest of the world has been trained to admire. Showing up at a school, bringing cookies, calling a child, offering a party. If you object, you sound cold. If you stay quiet, they keep going. I did not answer. Instead, I took screenshots of every message from the last week and put them in a folder. A soft voice from the living room said, "Daddy." I looked up. Sadie was standing there in pajamas with one sock sliding off her heel, holding a purple crayon. "Can I make a card for Owen anyway?" she asked. Even if we don't go, the question hit me in a place I did not have language for yet. She was trying to solve a tension she did not create using kindness she should never have had to budget. I swallowed and said, "You can make a card for anybody you want." So she did. Blue marker. Crooked letters. A dinosaur with too many teeth. She asked me how to spell cousin and birthday, then decorated the edges with stars. I watched her do it and felt that same clarity return sharper than before. At school, my mother had not been looking for peace. She had been laying foundations. If I ever pushed back harder, she wanted people already primed to see me as tense, reactive, maybe unreasonable. Kyle had picked up the language immediately. Brittany had reframed manipulation as inclusion. My father had backed the whole thing with authority and restraint. And my daughter, 5 years old, was sitting on the rug with a purple crayon, trying to be fair to people who had not been fair to her for 1 second. The line got crossed on a Monday afternoon. I was halfway through a status call when my phone buzzed with the school number. For 1 second, I thought maybe Sadie had a fever. I muted my laptop and answered on the second ring. "Mr. Parker," a woman asked. "Yes, this is Denise from the front office at Little Brook Elementary. There was a situation involving Sadie, and we wanted to speak with you directly before dismissal." The word situation changed the air in the room. I stood up from my desk without realizing I was doing it. "Is she okay?" "She's fine. Denise said quickly. She's with her class. But an older couple came to the office a little while ago and said they were there to pick her up early for a family birthday activity. I did not say anything for a second. My grip on the phone tightened so fast, it made my knuckles ache. Who, I asked, even though I already knew. They identified themselves as her grandparents. I turned away from my desk and stared at the wall. Did they take her? No, sir. They were not on the approved pickup list, so we did not release her. One of the teachers said the request felt unusual because there had been no note and no call from you. We told them we needed confirmation from a parent. They waited for a few minutes, then left. For a moment, all I could hear was the faint sound of my own blood in my ears. It was not confusion, not exactly anger either. It was that colder thing underneath both, the one that shows up when a line you thought was understood gets crossed like it was decorative. Did Sadie speak to them? I asked. They asked if she could be called to the office, Denise said. We didn't do that. I closed my eyes briefly. Thank you. She's all right, Denise repeated, gentle now. But we thought you should know right away. You did the right thing, I said. I'm leaving work now. I hung up, sent a 2-line apology to my team, and drove to the school on a kind of autopilot that did not feel like driving. My mother had not been trying to win an argument. She had been trying to get access. When I got to the office, Denise stood up from behind the desk and recognized me immediately. She was a woman in her 50s with reading glasses on a chain and the tired, efficient kindness of someone who had seen everything. Mr. Parker, thank you for calling. Of course. She lowered her voice. The principal would like to speak with you for a minute if you have time. I said yes before she finished asking. The principal, Dr. Holland, met me in a small office off the hallway. He invited me to sit, but I stayed standing for a few seconds, because sitting felt too calm for what had just happened. He did not push it. We wanted to let you know exactly what occurred, he said. The couple came in around 1:15 and told the front office they were taking Sadie out early for a family event. They said the arrangement had already been cleared. It had not. He gave a single nod. That was our assumption once staff checked the pickup list. I sat then because anger is easier to manage when your body has something solid under it. Did they give names? Yes. Diane and Russell Parker. Hearing it stated that cleanly, as though this were an entry in a file and not the inside of my life, made the whole thing feel more real. Did they say why they thought they could do that? I asked. Dr. Holland chose his words carefully. They said there had been a misunderstanding, and they wanted to save you a trip. That almost made me laugh. My mother never saved other people a trip. She assigned them one. I said, my daughter is not to be released to anyone but me. No grandparents, no aunt, no uncle, no family friend. No exceptions unless I send written authorization myself from my own email and confirm by phone. He nodded again. We can note that very clearly. We already have procedures in place, but I'm happy to add an extra alert for staff. I want that. You have it. I looked at the framed student art on the wall behind him, mostly because if I looked directly at another adult's face right then, some of what I was holding down might have shown. Did they make a scene? Not exactly, he said. Your mother was insistent. Your father was quieter. They were told several times that children are not called out of class without guardian authorization. They seemed unhappy, but they left. Insistent. Another tidy word. It could have covered anything from impatience to trespassing on the edge of a custody problem. Can I get that in writing? I asked. Dr. Holland held my gaze for the first time. Yes. When I walked down to Sadie's classroom, the kids were sitting in a half circle listening to a story. She spotted me through the narrow window in the door, and her whole face changed. A small smile, quick but real. She stood up before the teacher could stop her and ran the last few steps into the hallway when Ms. Alvarez let her out. Daddy, I knelt and hugged her. She smelled like crayons and playground dust. Hey, Sonny. She pulled back and looked at me closely, the way kids do when they know something around them shifted, and they are trying to decide whether it has a shape. Why are you early? I wanted to see you. That part was true, just not all of it. She took my hand as we walked out of the building. Halfway to the car, she said, "The office lady asked me if I knew anybody was coming to get me." I stopped walking for one beat, then kept us moving. "What did you tell her?" I said, "Only you." The relief that went through me was so sharp it almost felt like pain. That was exactly right. Sadie swung our hands once. Grandma said maybe she would pick me up one day so we could practice being cousins. I looked down at her. "Practice being cousins." She nodded, very serious. "Like spending time together before the birthday." I got her buckled in, then sat behind the wheel for a second before turning the key. "Sweetheart," I said, keeping my voice steady, "nobody gets to pick you up unless I tell you first. Not Grandma, not Grandpa, not anybody. If someone says otherwise, what do you say?" She thought about it. "I ask you." "Yes, and if I can't ask, you tell your teacher you only go with me." She nodded like we were reviewing a rule about crossing the parking lot. Maybe to her, that was all it was. A rule. I wanted it to stay that simple for as long as possible. When we got home, I set her up with a snack and called my mother. "Well," she said, bright and false, "this is a surprise. You went to Sadie's school." She clicked her tongue softly. So dramatic. "Answer the sentence." "Yes," she said, dropping the act at once. "We went to see if she could come out early for family time before Owen's birthday." There was no need for the school to make it so difficult. I closed my eyes for a second. "You tried to take my child out of school without my permission. Oh, for heaven's sake, Evan, take her. Don't take her. Listen to yourself. We were picking up your daughter, not stealing a car." That was my mother at her purest. Take a violation, shrink it, mock the person naming it, and call that reason. "You do not go around me," I said. "We are her grandparents, and I am her father." That should have ended it. In a healthy family, that is where the conversation stops. In mine, hierarchy bent around whatever my mother wanted that day. She sighed into the phone like I was exhausting her. "You are making this ugly because you enjoy feeling righteous." "No, I'm making it clear because you don't hear anything softer." There was a beat of silence. Then the sugar drained from her voice entirely. "You need to ask yourself what kind of example you're setting for Sadie. She is going to grow up thinking family is conditional." The cruelty of that was almost elegant. They skipped my daughter's birthday, tried to remove her from school, and somehow I was the one teaching conditional love. "She's going to grow up learning boundaries," I said. My mother laughed once, cold and short. That sounds like therapy language for selfishness. I could have argued. Years ago, I would have. That afternoon, I was too clear for it. "You are not to contact her school again," I said. "You are not to make pickup plans. Mention pickup plans or tell her I approved anything I did not approve. If it happens again, I'll deal with it formally." "What exactly does that mean?" "It means don't test me." Her voice sharpened. "Is that a threat?" "No," I said. "It's a boundary. You just hear it like a threat because you're used to walking through them." For a second, she said nothing, and in that second, I knew I had finally landed something she did not like. Then she recovered. "You're upset. Fine. But don't drag your father and me through the mud because the school staff panicked." I ended the call without answering. My father called 2 minutes later, as if they were sharing one script and one stopwatch. "This better not turn into some legal circus," he said the moment I answered. That confirmed two things at once. My mother had already fed him her version, and she understood perfectly well that what they had done could be described in a way she would not like. "You went with her," I said. "She asked us to pick up Sadie for a family afternoon. She asked my daughter." "Not me." My father's voice hardened. "You are blowing this wildly out of proportion." I looked through the kitchen doorway at Sadie, who was sitting cross-legged on the rug, arranging crackers into a little circle. "You are very calm for a man whose wife just got turned away trying to remove a kid from school without permission." "We were trying to help," he said. "You were trying to get around me. That is insulting." "No," I said. "It's accurate." He exhaled hard through his nose. "Your mother has done more for you than you seem to remember." There it was. The old debt ledger, the invisible one they never stopped referencing. The rides to baseball practice when I was 10. The Christmases they paid for when I was a child. The roof over my head before I was old enough to rent my own. In my family, ordinary parenting was never just parenting. It was credit, interest-bearing. You don't buy access to my daughter with things you did for me 20 years ago, I said. You're twisted up right now, he muttered. I'm not twisted up. I'm done pretending this is normal. He lowered his voice the way men do when they want to sound measured, right before saying something ugly. Be careful, Evan. Once you start freezing people out, you may not like what comes back. That line stayed with me after I hung up. Not because it scared me, because it told me he still thought this was leverage, family access as bargaining power, presence as punishment. That evening, I went through every contact setting the school used. Pickup list, emergency contacts, after-school authorization. I removed everyone but myself. Then I emailed Dr. Holland and copied the office. Per our conversation today, Sadie Parker is not to be released to any person other than me, without written authorization from me and verbal confirmation from my phone number. I kept the language clean and factual, because facts are easier to stand on later. Then I bought a doorbell camera, not because I thought my mother was about to climb through a window, because I was done relying on memory and tone and that soft, maddening family blur, where everybody later swears things were misunderstood. Cameras do not misunderstand. Logs do not get emotional. Timestamps do not care who feels disrespected. By the time the installer app finished loading, Brittany had texted, "I heard about school. That was unnecessary." I stared at that for a long time. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "Why did Diane do that?" The event itself was somehow still my overreaction. I wrote back, "She was not authorized." Brittany answered, "She was trying to do something nice for Sadie before tomorrow." I sent niece would have been showing up for her birthday. No response came after that, which told me I had finally pushed her out past the edge of her script. Later that night, Kyle called. I let him ring out, but he kept calling until Sadie looked up from the couch and said, "Is that Uncle Kyle?" So I answered, "What? You went nuclear over pickup." That was his first sentence. Nuclear. Another family specialty. They escalate, you respond, and then your response becomes the escalation. You mean the part where your mother tried to remove my kid from school? She was trying to take her for frozen yogurt and balloons, man. That is not her choice. She's grandma. I leaned against the wall outside Sadie's room so she would not hear the edge in my voice. Say that again, like it changes anything. Kyle was quiet for a second, then switched angles. Owen already thinks you hate his birthday. That line was so shameless, I almost respected it. Not because it was clever, but because it was pure strategy. Move the spotlight onto a child. Force me into defense. Make the grown-up conflict feel like cruelty toward a 6-year-old. I have not said one word to Owen, I said. You don't have to. Kids pick up stuff. Yes, I said. They do. Which is why maybe your mother should stop telling mine that cousins have to celebrate together while she's trying to make plans she never asked me about. He exhaled hard. God, you make everything into a case file. Maybe that's what happens when people keep lying, I said. Kyle laughed with no humor in it. You need help. You need distance from Mom. That shut him up for a second. Then he said, she's the only one trying to keep this family together. I looked toward Sadie's room. No, she's trying to keep control. He hung up on me. I slept badly that night, which was becoming common enough to feel ordinary. Not because I thought someone was coming to the house, because my mind would not stop running the pattern. My mother had called Sadie. My mother had floated pickup. My mother had pitched the party at school. My mother had shown up at the office. My father had backed her. Kyle had minimized it. Brittany had softened it. In the morning, Sadie asked at breakfast, "Am I in trouble at school?" The question hit so fast I had to set down the coffee mug before I answered. Why would you think that? She shrugged and pushed a strawberry around with her spoon. Because the office lady talked to me nice, and nice means something happened. I sat beside her. You are not in trouble. Not even a little. She studied my face, then nodded. Okay. A minute later she said, Grandma said you get tired and forget things. I kept my expression still, but inside something turned over heavy and hard. What did Grandma say you think I forget? That family stuff matters, Sadie said. She said sometimes grown-ups need help remembering. There it was. Not loud. Not crude. Just enough to start teaching a child that her father's decisions were mistakes other adults needed to correct. I did not answer right away. I peeled the sticker from a banana and set it beside my plate because doing something small kept my voice from showing too much. Sweetheart, I said, if anyone ever tells you I forgot something, you come ask me yourself. Okay? She nodded. Okay. And if someone says they already talked to me, I still ask you. Yes. That afternoon, I called a family attorney. A coworker had once mentioned during a custody mess with his ex-wife. I was not filing anything. I was not trying to start a courtroom war. I just wanted to know what normal people did when relatives refused to stay in their lane. The receptionist said the soonest consultation was the following week. I booked it. Then I started a note on my phone. Date, time, school pickup attempt, names used, staff response, statements made. It looked strange at first, like I was overreacting on paper. Then I added the call to Sadie about cousins, the school event, the messages, the pressure, the accusation that I was poisoning my daughter against the family. And the more I wrote, the less dramatic it looked. Not bigger, just clearer. After I booked the consultation, I went back through my email and found old threads from school enrollment, emergency forms, and pickup permissions. I forwarded them into a folder with screenshots from my phone and labeled it simply Sadie. Even naming it that way changed something in my head. This was no longer a family disagreement I was supposed to smooth over before the next holiday. It was a record of adults trying to teach my daughter that my answer could be bypassed. When Sadie got home, she went straight to the little table in the corner and picked up the birthday card she had made for Owen. She stared at it for a few seconds, then asked, "Do you still want me to give him this?" I looked at the crooked dinosaur, the blue letters, the effort in every inch of it. "If you want to," I said. She thought about that. Maybe not right now. So we put it in a drawer. That night, when I checked the new camera app before bed, there was nothing there but the porch light and a moth hitting the lens once every few seconds. The house was quiet. The locks were on. Sadie was asleep. And still, I sat there, holding my phone, staring at the screen, because once people decide they're entitled to your child, silence stops feeling peaceful. It starts feeling like planning. That should have been the point where it slowed down, but it didn't. The first message from Holly came on Wednesday at 11:14 in the morning, while I was trying to finish a spreadsheet and ignore the tightness at the base of my neck. I did not recognize the number, so I almost let it sit. Then a second text came through before I could decide. "This is Holly Bennett. Your cousin Claire gave me your number years ago. I think you need to know what they've been saying." I stared at the screen for a few seconds, trying to place the name. Then it clicked. Holly was my mother's niece through her older sister. Technically my cousin, though we had never grown up close. She was older than me by maybe 8 or 9 years, lived 2 towns over, and showed up to holidays just often enough for people to remember she existed. Quiet, observant, polite. The sort of person my mother always described as a little distant, which in family language usually meant difficult to control. I typed back, "What are they saying?" Her reply took less than a minute, too much to put in one text. "Are you free later today?" I looked at my calendar, then at the folder on my desktop with Sadie's name on it. 3 weeks earlier, I would have ignored a message like that out of pure exhaustion. By then, I had learned something useful. People who benefit from confusion hate records, and people who get tired of the performance usually start by whispering. I wrote tonight after 6 works. She sent back a coffee shop address in Brookfield with a simple, "See you there." The place was half full when I arrived, all dark wood and soft music, meant to make strangers feel less alone without encouraging them to speak. Holly was already at a corner table with a tea she had barely touched and a canvas tote bag resting beside her chair. She stood when she saw me, gave me a small, awkward smile, and sat again before either of us could turn it into a family greeting we did not mean. "Thanks for coming," she said. "Thanks for reaching out." Up close, she looked exactly the way I remembered, and older in a way that made sense. Same steady eyes, same careful posture as if she had spent years learning how to take up just enough space to avoid becoming part of anyone else's scene. "You look tired," she said. "That tracks." She nodded and pulled her phone from her purse. I wasn't sure if I should get involved, but when I heard about the school thing, I decided I couldn't pretend this was normal anymore. That sentence landed harder than she probably knew. It was the first time anyone in the family had used the word normal like it had a real definition. "What did you hear?" I asked. "That Diane and Russell tried to pick Sadie up for a family surprise, and the school overreacted because you've been telling people they're dangerous." I sat back in my chair. "I have not told anyone that." "I know," Holly said. "That's not the point. The point is that a version is already circulating and it's getting uglier every day." She unlocked her phone and turned it toward me. "I'm not going to send you everything right this second because I want you to see the pattern first." There were screenshots, group messages, side threads, family texts with names I recognized and a few I barely did. Holly had marked some of them with dates in the corner. One screenshot showed my mother writing to a group of female relatives. "He's been unstable for a while ever since he started isolating Sadie from everyone. We're trying to stay calm for the child." Another from 2 days later. "Please do not engage with him directly if he's angry. He twists everything." I looked up. She sent that to other people. Holly gave a small, humorless smile. "That's one of the milder ones." She scrolled. Kyle wrote in another thread, "He's acting like Owen personally insulted Sadie by turning 6. Brittany replied, "We're all trying to keep things positive for the kids, but he's making every event about his resentment." Then my mother again. "I'm honestly worried he's not coping well. Sadie needs family around her, especially when one parent gets this controlling." I felt something in my jaw tighten. The words themselves were bad enough. What made them worse was the design. They weren't raw insults. They were strategic, concern, positive for the kids, needs family around her, controlling. If those messages ever escaped the family, they would still look respectable at first glance. "She's building a case in people's heads," I said. "Yes," Holly answered quietly. "That's exactly what she's doing." She reached into the tote and slid a thin folder across the table. I printed some of the screenshots because once people realize they've been saying too much, things start disappearing. I opened it. Every page was dated. Some threads were highlighted. Holly had even written who was in each group if the full participant list was cut off. "Why do you have all this?" I asked. She did not seem offended by the question. "Because your mother has been using family group texts as a private court for years. Most people skim and forget. I don't. I learned a long time ago that if Diane is being sweet in public, she's usually managing something in private." That sounded less like gossip and more like weather reporting. Holly took a breath. "I need you to understand something, Evan. This isn't about one party. It may have started there for you, but for her, this is about hierarchy. Kyle's branch is the golden branch right now. Owen is the favored grandchild, because Kyle plays along. Brittany performs the right kind of gratitude, and they make your mother look central. You don't." The words should have shocked me. Instead, they fit too neatly. I said, "Sadie's 5. I know. She's doing this over a 5-year-old's birthday." Holly's expression did not change. "She's doing it because you told her no." That sat between us for a moment. Then she pulled out another page and placed it on top. This one was older, from months before Sadie's party. It was a screenshot of a group planning thread for Thanksgiving. "Mom wants Owen at the head of the kids' table for the photos," Brittany wrote. Another relative replied with a laughing emoji. Then my mother said, "Sadie can sit with the little girls. Owen should be front and center with the boys." I looked at it, then back at Holly. "What is this?" "A small example," she said. "Do you remember Christmas 2 years ago when there were no stockings left on the mantle for Sadie?" I did. We had shown up 15 minutes late because Sadie spilled juice on the dress she wanted to wear and needed to change. By the time we got there, all 4 stockings on the mantel had names stitched on them. Owen, Brittany, Kyle, and my parents' dog. My mother laughed, handed Sadie a gift bag from a closet shelf, and told me not to make a face because it was Christmas. Holly slid another printout toward me. Diane, I'm not redoing the mantel because Evan can't be on time. The children who live nearby come first. Another woman replied, Sadie's going to notice. My mother wrote back, then maybe her father should teach her punctuality. I stared at the page so long the words began to blur. Why are you showing me this now? I asked. Because you're finally seeing the big picture, Holly said. And once someone starts seeing it, the worst thing you can do is leave them wondering whether they imagined the rest. She showed me more. After Sadie's birthday, my mother wrote that I had always been possessive. Brittany said I used favors as leverage. Kyle wrote, he's mad because nobody treats him like the savior anymore. Holly said, that one stuck with me because it's so revealing. How? Because it tells you how they explain your usefulness, not as generosity, as ego. If they admit you helped because you cared, then they'd have to admit they took from you. So instead, they reframe it. You helped because you like feeling important. You showed up because you need attention. You organized things because you're controlling. That way, they never owe you gratitude, and they never have to feel ashamed. I let out a long breath. That sounds like a therapist wrote it. She smiled faintly. No, just somebody who stopped volunteering at the family circus. That was the first moment that evening I actually liked her. We talked for almost an hour. Holly did not ramble. She gave me dates, examples, and context. The more she spoke, the more the years behind my current mess rearranged themselves into something coherent. There was the pattern of family events, where Kyle and Brittany were presented as the central unit, and everyone else got slotted around them. There was the way my mother described Owen as our little legacy, and Sadie as so independent, which sounded complimentary until you heard the translation. Independent meant easier to neglect. Legacy meant worth displaying. There was the running habit of making me useful, but never essential. If there were chairs to haul, somebody called me. If there were names to print on place cards, my mother called Brittany because Brittany had a better eye. If there was a school fundraiser, I got asked to transport boxes. Kyle got asked to stand next to my mother in the photo. Holly said, you were always cast as reliable support. That role only works if you never ask for equal treatment. I rubbed a hand over my face. Did everybody know this? No. Not consciously. Most people just adapt to the temperature. They don't name it. They joke about it. They work around it. A few of us noticed. Fewer of us did anything. I looked at the folder. Why now? She was quiet for the first time that night. Then she said, because my daughter is 15 now, and a few months ago your mother tried to recruit her into one of these little loyalty games. She told her not to mention something to me because it would upset me unnecessarily. My daughter came home and repeated it word for word, and I realized I was one generation away from raising a child who thought triangulation was normal. That hit me because it was so specific and so ugly. She stopped coming around after that, Holly said. And when I heard what happened with Sadie, I recognized the same move immediately. The nice language, the private pressure, the way a child gets turned into proof of whichever adult is easier to control. I asked if I could copy everything. She said yes. Then she looked at me for a long moment and added, I need to be clear about one thing. If you use any of this, your mother will know it came from someone inside the circle. I understood that. Family systems like ours did not punish lying nearly as much as they punished disloyal truth. I won't do anything careless, I said. Holly nodded. Good. Because carelessness is where she's strongest. She counts on people reacting emotionally so she can step back and look composed. When I left the coffee shop, the night air felt colder than it had an hour earlier. Not because I was surprised, because confirmation has weight. Confusion floats. Proof drops straight into your chest. At home, after Sadie was asleep, I spread the printouts across the kitchen table and started organizing them by type instead of date. School comments, child contact, reputation management, past favoritism, holiday examples. The act of sorting them did something useful to my brain. It turned pain into categories. Some screenshots were almost absurd in their pettiness. A group thread about Easter baskets where my mother wrote Owen's basket should feel a little more substantial because he's the only boy carrying on the name. Another where Brittany complained that Sadie was too young to notice seating arrangements at a birthday dinner, so there was no reason to disrupt the visual. Disrupt the visual. My daughter had been spoken about like a decor problem. There were older examples, too. A summer barbecue where my mother told someone Sadie was sweet, but not very social even though she was 3, and had spent half the day playing quietly in the grass. A cousin's baptism where Kyle posted photos of Owen in a tiny suit, and my mother replied, "Our future little gentleman," while the only photo of Sadie that day was one where she had frosting on her cheek, and someone captioned it, "Princess Chaos." No one example looked like enough on its own. That was part of the genius. Any single incident could be brushed off. Together they formed a language. I copied everything into the folder on my computer, then sent backups to a private email account I barely used. After that, I started a second note beneath the first one. Historical pattern. Display preference for Kyle's family. Repeated public framing of me as unstable, possessive, dramatic, controlling. Repeated private outreach to Sadie without consent. Repeated attempts to create narrative of keeping family from her. Once I started, more memories came back without invitation. The baby dedication at Kyle's church where my mother gave Brittany a bracelet, engraved with generations, and handed me a gift card for gas because I did so much running around. The weekend I spent 6 hours assembling a swing set in Kyle's yard, while my father kept saying Owen would remember this forever, as if I were some hired hand, gifted the privilege of contributing to family history. I did not write all of them down that night because I did not trust memory to stay factual after midnight. But I wrote enough. The next morning, Holly sent one more message. "There's something else. Diane has been telling people you've talked about moving and taking Sadie away where no one can find her. If anyone repeats that to you, know it started with her." I read that text 3 times. Then I called Holly immediately. "Where did that come from?" "A prayer circle message," she said. And somehow, that was worse than if she had named a gossip chain. One of my aunts screenshotted it and sent it to me because she thought it was over the top. What exactly did Diane say? That she was asking for prayers because you'd become secretive and might disappear with Sadie if the family kept pushing too hard. The last part settled something in me I had still been resisting. Until then, part of me had been hoping that if I stayed steady enough, maybe the whole thing would burn itself out. Holly's screenshots killed that cleanly. This was not heat. It was structure. A story like that does not stop on its own. It gets sharper once it realizes you are resisting. An hour after that call, my Aunt Linda phoned. "Hi, sweetheart," she said. The endearment landed like a trap door because she had never called me that in my adult life. "Hi, Aunt Linda. I just wanted to check on you." I waited. She sighed. "Your mother is worried. She says you've been under a lot of pressure and talking about moving without telling anyone." There it was, arriving exactly where Holly said it would. "No," I said. "I'm not planning to vanish with my daughter." "Well," Aunt Linda said too quickly. I told her it was probably just stress talking. I almost asked whether she also thought attempting a school pickup without permission was stress talking. Instead, I said, "If you're worried, ask me directly. Don't ask Diane and then call me with her language." Silence. Then she said much smaller, "I did ask you directly." That was technically true, and it made me dislike the whole structure even more. My mother fed concern into the system, and the system delivered it back to me wearing softer faces. "I'm fine," I said. "Sadie is fine. What's not fine is people going around me to get to my child." Aunt Linda hesitated. "Your mother says she was trying to help." "Of course she does." Another silence followed, and this one felt less certain. Finally she said, "Well, I suppose there are always 2 sides." That phrase used to make me defensive. By then, it just made me tired. Two sides only works when both people are living in the same reality. After we hung up, I added one more line to the file. Rumor spread to extended relatives claim that I may relocate with Sadie and cut off all contact. Source likely Diane. Then I moved my consultation with the family attorney to the earliest cancellation they had. That afternoon, Sadie came out of her room holding a stuffed rabbit under one arm and asked if Grandma was still doing the cousin birthday thing. The phrase was so childlike it almost softened the edges of everything around it. No, I said. She nodded once, accepting it more easily than any adult in my family had accepted a boundary all week. Then she looked at me and asked, "Did I do something wrong at my party?" The room went still around me. No, I said immediately. Then why did everybody not come? Children ask the question, adults spend days trying to route around in one sentence. I sat down on the edge of the couch and pulled her close. Because some grown-ups make selfish choices sometimes. That has nothing to do with you. She leaned into me and twisted one ear of the rabbit between her fingers. Grandma says family is supposed to show up. I looked down at the top of her head and felt the full ugliness of it. My mother had not just skipped the party. She had left behind a slogan and expected me to clean up under it. I said, "Good family does show up." Sadie was quiet for a moment. Okay. After I put her to bed, I went back to the kitchen table, looked at the stack Holly had given me, and understood that my problem was no longer deciding whether my mother had crossed a line. My problem was that I finally knew she had been building one for years and expecting me to live on the wrong side of it. By then I had stopped asking them to act like family. The attorney's office was on the second floor of a brick building above a dentist and across from a pharmacy, which felt right somehow. Nothing dramatic. No polished marble lobby. No giant reception desk meant to intimidate people into telling smaller lies. Just beige walls, a coffee machine that looked older than some marriages, and a receptionist who pronounced my last name correctly the first time. Her name was Melissa. She came out from behind the desk and shook my hand before leading me to a conference room with a legal pad already sitting in the center of the table. "Mr. Corbett will be with you in a minute," she said. I sat down, pulled this folder from my bag, and set it on the table in front of me. Screenshots, printed texts, school notes, names, dates. I had organized it all twice and still felt like I was carrying something chaotic, because family mess does not stop being family mess just because you put it in a folder. A man in his late 40s stepped in. A minute later, wearing a navy tie and the kind of expression some people probably mistook for kindness until they saw how closely he listened. "Daniel Corbett," he said. "Sorry to keep you waiting." We shook hands and he sat across from me without pretending this was going to be pleasant. "Tell me what's happening." So I did. I started with the birthday. I moved through the text from my mother about Owen's party, the $10, the pressure campaign, the school event. The direct calls to Sadie, the pickup attempt, the screenshots Holly gave me, and the newer rumor that I might disappear with my daughter. I kept it clean and chronological because I had learned by then that clear sequence matters more than vivid language. Daniel took notes without interrupting much. When he did stop me, it was never to question emotion. It was always to pin down a fact. Exact date of the pickup attempt. Did your daughter ever leave school property with them? Did your mother ever explicitly state that you had approved pickup? Do you have the original screenshots or just printouts? Has anyone used the phrase grandparents' rights yet? That last question made me look up. Not directly, I said. But my father warned me not to turn things into a legal circus, and the whole family has started using words like controlling and isolating. Daniel nodded once. That is usually how it starts. I sat back in the chair. What does it look like? He capped his pen and folded his hands. Most of the time, pressure. Social pressure first. Narrative pressure second. Occasionally, an older relative who's used to getting access assumes the law will bend around blood ties because it always bent around family dynamics before. Sometimes they bluff. Sometimes they call a lawyer and discover the law is less sentimental than they expected. I felt some of the tightness in my shoulders shift, not vanish, but relocate. Are they close to having a case? He did not soften the answer. From what you've shown me, no. Grandparent visitation claims vary by state and by circumstances, but courts do not generally like grandparents using manipulation, unauthorized contact, or school pickup attempts to build a relationship over a parent's objection. Your daughter lives with you full-time. Yes. Any active custody dispute with her mother. Number. He nodded again. Then your position is stronger than the stories your family is circulating would suggest. I let out a breath I had not realized I was holding. Daniel reached for the folder. The more important issue right now is not whether they can win something. It's whether they can continue creating instability while telling everyone they're acting out of concern. That was the clearest description of the whole thing anyone had given me. So what do? I asked. He turned the first page over and looked at my notes. We tighten the frame. That phrase stayed with me. He explained it in steps. First, we create a paper trail that does not sound emotional. Not angry. Not dramatic. Not full of family history. Precise and limited. Second, we separate feelings from conduct. They are free to feel insulted. They are not free to contact the school, arrange pickup, pressure the child, or circulate damaging claims as leverage. Third, we issue formal notice before deciding whether anything stronger is needed. That did not mean court. It meant a letter from counsel. Something clear enough that no one could later pretend boundaries were vague. He wrote 3 items on the legal pad and turned it toward me. No direct contact with child without parents' consent. No school or extracurricular pickup attempts. No false representations to third parties regarding parental fitness. I looked at the page. It was almost disappointingly simple, which probably meant it was useful. Daniel said, "We can also include a preservation notice regarding messages and communications. People behave differently once they realize deletion can look as bad as the original conduct. That will make them furious." Yes, he said. But it will also make them cautious, and right now cautious is better than comfortable. I thought about my mother reading a lawyer's letter and losing the ability to hide behind tone. No sighs. No selective tears. Just conduct in black print. Daniel asked, "Do you want to keep the door open for supervised, respectful contact down the line? Or are you asking for complete distance at this stage?" The question deserved honesty. "I want them away from Sadie. For now," I said. "They are already trying to teach her that my decisions are optional." That's the answer I needed. He made another note. Then the letter should be framed around safety, authority, and confusion caused to the child. Not punishment. Courts and schools both respond better to language that protects structure rather than language that sounds retaliatory. I nodded. Makes sense. He looked at me for a second. You're calmer than most people in your position. I almost smiled. I'm not calm, I'm just tired. That can still help. He spent the next half hour walking me through what not to do. Do not rant in family group chats. Do not threaten to ruin anyone. Do not blast screenshots on social media. Do not debate your mother line by line because she is better trained for that arena than you are. Do not let sympathy pull you into an unrecorded meeting. Do not let guilt pull you into a compromise that becomes evidence against your own boundary. If they bait you into sounding volatile, Daniel said they'll use it. If they bait you into sounding uncertain, they'll use that too. You need one tone now, clear, repetitive, limited. I asked him what that tone sounded like. He said, "This does not work for us. Do not contact Sadie directly. Direct all communication through me or by email. We will not discuss this by phone." I wrote it down because once I heard it put that cleanly, I realized how much energy I had been wasting answering the wrong questions. Before I left, Daniel said, "One more thing. If your daughter starts repeating language that clearly came from adults, document the wording exactly as she says it. Don't coach. Don't interpret. Just note it." Why? Because children do not invent phrases like "keeping family away" or "dad forgot family stuff matters." Those are adult narratives entering the child's space. By the time I got back to my car, I felt something I had not felt since Sadie's birthday party ended in that empty room. Not peace. Direction. I approved the letter the next morning. Daniel sent me the draft first. It was 2 pages firm and restrained in a way my mother would hate, because there was nowhere to insert herself emotionally. It outlined the school incident, referenced repeated direct outreach to Sadie without my consent. Instructed Diane and Russell to cease any attempt to contact the school or arrange access outside of me, and warned that further interference could result in formal steps to protect the child from confusion and unauthorized contact. No insults, no adjectives, just facts and consequences. I read it 3 times, changed one date that had been off by a day, and sent it back with one line. Approved. The letter went out certified that afternoon. My mother called within 3 hours. I did not answer. She called again, then my father, then Kyle, then an unknown number which I assumed was either my mother using someone else's phone or a relative acting as an extension of her panic. I let all of it ring out. A few minutes later, my inbox filled. Diane, I cannot believe you involved a lawyer over family. Russell, this is humiliating. Kyle, you have lost your mind. Brittany, please tell me you're not escalating this. I forwarded every message to Daniel's office and did not respond. That was harder than it sounds. Silence is simple in theory and exhausting in practice when you were raised to answer every summons. My whole nervous system had been trained to believe that if my mother was angry, something somewhere required fixing. Ignoring the messages felt less like strength and more like walking past a fire alarm while hoping it was only noise. The next day, my Aunt Linda left a voicemail. Evan, honey, your mother is beside herself. She says the letter makes it sound like she's a danger to Sadie, and everybody is very upset. I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding. Please call someone. Call someone. Not call me. Not call your mother. Just someone. Anybody willing to re-enter the old system and get spun around until they apologized for having a boundary. I saved the voicemail and sent it to Daniel too. By Friday, the family had shifted tactics. It stopped being about hurt feelings and became concern. My cousin Matthew sent, "Heard you lawyered up because your parents tried to surprise Sadie with yogurt. That feels extreme." Another relative asked whether stress from single parenting had made me see bad intent where there was none. My mother was not just controlling the story anymore. She was laundering it through sympathetic people who could approach me without seeming strategic. Then Kyle did exactly what Daniel had predicted someone eventually would. He texted, "If you keep freezing everyone out, don't be surprised if people start looking at legal options." I read that message twice, screenshotted it, and forwarded it immediately. Daniel replied 10 minutes later, "Good. Do not engage. Threat language is useful when it's written down. Useful. Not terrifying. Not catastrophic. Useful." That was one of the first moments I understood what lawyers really do when they are good. They do not just file documents. They alter your relationship to panic. Still, useful did not mean pleasant. By evening, my stomach felt like I had swallowed metal filings. Sadie was on the floor building a crooked animal hospital out of blocks while I stood in the kitchen, pretending to decide between pasta shapes. "Daddy," she said, holding up a toy giraffe. "This one needs a doctor and a blanket. Then we should probably hire the best doctor in town." She grinned and went back to work. That was the strange split I was living in by then. Half my life was school pickup, dinner socks, crayons, cartoon voices for stuffed animals. The other half was certified letters, screenshots, and a family trying to paint me unstable because I would not let them enter my daughter's life on their terms. That night after Sadie was asleep, I got another email from Holly. "They're reacting badly. Diane says the lawyer letter proves you've been planning this for months. She's also telling people Brittany cried because Owen asked why his uncle hates him." I wrote back, "Thanks, save anything you can." She answered with one sentence, "Already doing it." Over the next few days, the counter-narrative hardened exactly the way Daniel said it would. They started using parental language. My mother wrote in one group thread that she feared I was alienating Sadie from healthy family attachment. Brittany told someone I was teaching suspicion. Kyle claimed I had become obsessed with control and documentation. My father stayed quieter in writing, which meant he had likely shifted to private calls where tone left fewer marks. The first time I saw the phrase alienating my daughter, I stared at the screen for a long minute. Not because the claim made sense, because it was so nakedly stolen from actual custody disputes and repurposed for a grandmother who had missed a birthday and tried an unauthorized school pickup. I sent that screenshot to Daniel too. He wrote back, predictable. Save it. On Tuesday morning, Melissa from his office called and said Daniel wanted to review next steps if contact continued. I took the call from my parked car after drop-off. They responded through counsel, I asked. No, she said. No attorney yet. Mostly direct messages and third-party pressure. Mr. Corbett thinks the volume itself is becoming part of the record. Soon. That afternoon, I met him again, this time by phone. They are not acting like people who misunderstood one boundary, he said. They are acting like people who lost informal access and are trying to manufacture leverage. What does that mean practically? It means we prepare as though they may consult someone and throw words around that sound bigger than their facts. He laid it out plainly. If my parents spoke to a lawyer, they might use phrases like emotional cutoff manipulation, unstable environment, or alienation. None of those phrases won on their own. They still needed evidence. My job was not to defeat imaginary claims one by one. My job was to become a parent with structure so well documented that their language looked exactly as inflated as it was. Keep pickup records. Keep school communications. Keep notes of what Sadie says if it's clearly prompted. Keep your own responses measured. If they contact the school again, we move faster. Faster how? Formal warning to the school to treat them as unauthorized persons attempting contact. Potential trespass notice if conduct repeats. And if direct contact with the child continues, we can discuss a petition for protective conditions around interference. The language was dry enough to be comforting. After the call, I did something small and stubbornly practical. I bought a cheap notebook with a black cover and started writing entries by hand in addition to digital copies. Date, event, time, names, statements, child comments. My handwriting looked stranger than usual because my hand was still carrying more tension than I realized. 3 days later, my mother sent a message that broke her own pattern. It was short. I hope you understand what you're teaching Sadie by turning love into paperwork. I read it standing in the laundry room while the dryer buzzed behind me. There are sentences that are meant to provoke an answer, and sentences that are meant to provoke guilt. That one was the second kind. It was not asking me to explain. It was offering me a chance to step back into the old role and reassure her that no paperwork could ever come between family if everyone just calmed down and forgot what happened. I did not answer. 10 minutes later, she sent another. You are making choices you cannot undo. I forwarded that too. By then, forwarding had become almost automatic, and I noticed how much that changed the emotional weather inside me. The messages still upset me. They still made my jaw tighten and my sleep thinner. But each one now also had a destination beyond my own nervous system. It did not just enter my life. It entered a file. On Saturday morning, while Sadie was coloring in the living room, someone knocked on the door. I checked the camera first. Brittany stood on the porch holding a white bakery box with a pink ribbon taped across it. Her smile on the camera feed looked rehearsed, but not fully stable. I opened the door without stepping aside. Hi, she said. What are you doing here? She held up the box a little. I brought cupcakes for Sadie. I thought maybe we could start fixing this before it gets any uglier. The fact that she came alone was not comforting. It meant she had been selected as the least threatening messenger. I'm not discussing this at the door. Her smile thinned. I'm not here to fight. No. You're here because my mother can't come after the letter, and someone decided you would look softer on camera. For a second, her face lost control. Then it came back. That's insulting. It's accurate. She shifted the bakery box to one hand. Look. Owen had a nice birthday, but he noticed Sadie wasn't there. He asked about her a few times. I think it would mean a lot if she had these. I glanced at the box, then back at Brittany. A week earlier, I might have hesitated long enough to make room for politeness. By then, I could see the structure too clearly. Accept the cupcakes, accept the premise. Let them back in through sugar and concern. Tomorrow there would be a photo of Sadie eating them, or a story about how Brittany tried and I was impossible. No, I said. Her eyebrows lifted. You're rejecting cupcakes. I'm rejecting uninvited drop-ins and props. Brittany looked over my shoulder, probably checking whether Sadie was visible from the entryway. I stepped just enough to block the angle. Can you please just be reasonable, she asked. That word again. Reasonable. In my family, it always meant yielding to the person who had already overreached. I am being reasonable. Leave, her voice dropped. Do you have any idea how bad this looks from the outside? The honesty of that startled me more than anything else she had said. Yes, I answered. I think about that every day. That's why you should leave. She stood there for another second, then set the bakery box down on the porch, like she was depositing evidence of her own virtue, and walked back to her car. I waited until she drove away, then brought the box inside only long enough to take a picture of it, where it sat unopened by the door. After that, I put it straight into the outside trash. Not because I thought the cupcakes were dangerous, because gifts from people who ignore your no do not arrive as gifts. That afternoon, Kyle texted me, really classy throwing Brittany out. I sent no reply. An hour later, she was trying to help. Still nothing. Then keep documenting, man. Judges love guys like you. That one I forwarded too. Sunday night, Daniel replied with 2 lines. Do not respond. Their tone is deteriorating. That matters. By the following week, the school situation stayed quiet, but Sadie started saying little things that told me the pressure had not fully stopped. At breakfast, she asked, "Is control a bad word?" I looked up from buttering toast. Where did you hear that? She shrugged. I don't remember. Children often do remember. They just know when a memory has edges. What did you hear exactly? I asked. She squinted, trying to put it back together. Something about too much control is not love. I wrote that down later, word for word. 2 nights after that, she asked whether good dads let grandmas help. A day later, she said maybe grandma thought I was too busy. None of those sentences sounded like a child reaching conclusions on her own. They sounded like residue, the kind that stays in a room after adults leave. I documented those too. The hardest part of that stretch was how ordinary the days still looked from the outside. I packed lunches. I answered work emails. I signed a field trip permission slip. I bought more detergent. I asked Sadie to put on shoes 3 times every morning because 5-year-olds can lose a full 10 minutes to 1 sock and a sticker book. Nothing in my actual house looked like the kind of crisis my family was narrating. The chaos was largely administrative, psychological, ambient. That made it easier for them to lie about, and harder for other people to grasp, which was exactly why structure mattered. By the end of the week, Daniel sent a follow-up letter, not to widen the conflict, but to narrow it harder. It reiterated the direct contact restriction, referenced continued third-party pressure, and stated that any suggestion of legal action should be directed through counsel rather than used to intimidate the parent. It also preserved the right to notify institutions caring for the child that certain relatives were not authorized for contact. When I read that line, I finally understood the shape of what I was building. Not revenge. Not yet. Maybe not ever in the theatrical sense my mother would understand. I was building a wall they could not charm their way through, guilt their way through, or publicly shame me into lowering. And for the first time since Sadie sat in that party room waiting for cars that never came, that felt stronger than anger. It felt usable. The party they cared about finally arrived. I did not wake up that Saturday thinking about revenge. I woke up because Sadie climbed into my bed at 6:30 with 1 cold foot and asked if pancakes counted as a weekend rule. I made pancakes, let her pick the cartoon, and kept my phone face down on the counter because I already knew the day was going to be loud without me helping it along. By then, Owen's birthday had grown in my mind into something larger than a child's party, which was not Owen's fault. It had become the event my family used as proof of loyalty, the stage where everyone expected me either to crawl back into formation or confirm the role they had written for me. Since I had done neither, the room was always going to feel different. I did not plan to go near it. That much was easy. What I did plan to do was stay available, keep records, and avoid being pulled into whatever version of togetherness they intended to perform for each other that afternoon. Daniel had been clear, do not attend anything unless there is a practical legal reason. Your presence will be used as provocation or evidence, whichever suits them better. Holly said almost the same thing in her own way. If you walk into a room your mother designed, don't be surprised when she finds your mark before you find a chair. So I stayed home with Sadie, took her to the small park by the lake around noon, and tried to let the day belong to a 6-year-old boy I had no issue with, rather than to the machinery orbiting him. At 1:17, my phone buzzed with a message from a number I recognized only because Holly had texted from it twice that week. They started early. Your mother is already talking. A minute later, another one came in. She's telling people the lawyer letter was written because you spiraled after one disappointment, and now you won't let Sadie near anyone who loves her. I stared at the screen, then slipped the phone back into my pocket because Sadie was halfway up the ladder to the slide and yelling for me to look. I waved, smiled, and watched her launch herself down with the fearless trust of someone who still believed gravity was friendly. That was the strangest thing about the whole period. Catastrophe and ordinary life never arrived separately. They braided together. A family was quietly trying to build a case against my judgment, while I stood under bright plastic playground equipment, listening to my daughter explain why a blue slide was faster than a red one. When we got home, I put on a movie for Sadie and checked my phone again. Holly Brittany's mother is here, some church people are here, and Diane is working the room like she's hosting a fundraiser. Then, Kyle keeps telling people you're still upset. Then a third message with a photo attached. It was not an explosive photo. No one was crying. No one was caught in some cinematic act. It was just a picture of the party room at an indoor family entertainment center, all blue balloons and paper dinosaur cutouts. My mother stood near the dessert table with one hand on Brittany's arm, smiling at two women I vaguely recognized from church. The smile was exactly the one she used when she wanted to look generous, burdened, and central all at once. Under the photo, Holly had typed, "You were right about the audience." I did not answer immediately. There was nothing useful to say. Instead, I saved the photo. Around 2 o'clock, my phone rang with a number I did not know. I let it go to voicemail. 30 seconds later, a text arrived. "This is Monica Brittany's sister. I know things are tense, but I thought you should know people are asking questions." I read that twice because Monica and I had never texted in our lives. Before I could decide whether to respond, another message came in. "Your mother said Sadie wasn't there because certain people don't believe in forgiveness. That's not landing as well as she thought." That was new. My mother was careful. She liked subtext because it gave her deniability. If she was moving into phrasing obvious enough that outside relatives were noticing, then the pressure inside the room must already be higher than she liked. I wrote back one sentence, "Thanks for letting me know. Monica sent Brittany is upset. Diane keeps making it worse." I put the phone down after that because it was enough. More than enough. The point was not to collect every scrap of discomfort from a birthday party I had refused to attend. The point was to notice the shift. Their version of me was not moving through the room as cleanly as it had in text threads. At 3:12, Holly texted again. One of the church women asked why Diane tried to pick Sadie up from school if the relationship was so healthy. Your mother said that was a misunderstanding caused by office staff. Then, Brittany's mother asked why a misunderstanding needed a lawyer letter. Then, Kyle is getting angry. I could picture it too easily. My brother never did well when a room stopped mirroring back the version of events he had been promised. He liked moral certainty when it favored him, and impatience when it did not. A few minutes later, another photo came through, this one clearly taken in a hurry. Kyle stood near the gift table, jaw tight, talking too close to someone just out of frame. Brittany was behind him, holding a paper plate, not eating. My mother was visible over his shoulder, scanning the room instead of looking at the child whose birthday they had supposedly centered. That detail got me more than I expected. Owen was somewhere off to the side opening gifts, and 3 adults had already turned his party into a referendum on my obedience. Sadie wandered into the kitchen while I was staring at the photo. "Can I have grapes?" "Yeah." She climbed onto a stool while I rinsed them. "Do you think Owen has a bounce house right now?" "Probably." She considered that seriously. "I hope he doesn't fall off." I set the bowl in front of her and almost laughed at the contrast. My daughter was worried about a 6-year-old falling off inflatable plastic. My family was busy turning his birthday into a loyalty tribunal. Children really do tell on adults without meaning to. At 4 o'clock, there was a knock at the door. I checked the camera first. Monica stood on the porch in a tan sweater, holding her car keys in one hand and looking like someone who had driven over on impulse and regretted it halfway there. I had met her maybe 4 times. She was Brittany's older sister, the kind of in-law adjacent person who usually hovered just outside the main drama because she had her own life. I opened the door but stayed in the frame. "Hi," she said. "Sorry, I know this is weird." "That depends on why you're here." She let out a breath. "Fair." I waited. "Brittany doesn't know I came," Monica said. "I left the party early." That interested me enough to keep listening. "She asked me not to say anything," Monica went on, "but it's bad in there. And honestly, I'm uncomfortable being around it." I looked past her at the street. "What exactly is bad?" "Your mother is talking too much," she said. "And Kyle is trying to control who talks to whom. Brittany's acting like everything is fine, but it obviously isn't." At first I thought this was just family tension. Then your name came up 5 different times in 20 minutes at a 6-year-old's birthday. That stopped feeling normal. Normal again. That word had started mattering to me in a way it never had before. I said, "What do you want from me?" "Nothing," she answered quickly. "I just thought you should know people are seeing it now." That was not nothing. She shifted on the porch and lowered her voice. There was a conversation near the drinks table. One of the church women said she'd heard from somebody at the school that Diane and Russell were turned away trying to pick Sadie up. Brittany tried to smooth it over, but then your mother said, "We were only trying to save him the trouble because he gets overwhelmed." I did not move. Monica looked at me steadily. And that sounded awful. Not subtle awful, just awful. Like she was building a narrative in real time and forgot everybody else was listening. I thought about every gentle phrasing my mother had used up to that point. Stressed, sensitive, burdened, overwhelmed. Each one selected because it sounded compassionate until you lined them up. "What did Brittany say?" I asked. Monica's expression changed a little. "Nothing useful." She mostly looked embarrassed. But then someone asked why, if things were so delicate, your mother had invited Sadie through direct calls instead of talking to you. And Brittany said, "We were trying to keep the kids out of adult conflict." That actually made me laugh once quietly. Monica's mouth tightened. "Yeah," Sadie called from inside. "Daddy, where are the napkins?" "In the drawer by the fridge." Monica glanced past me just enough to hear a child's voice and seemed to remember the actual scale of the situation. "Look," she said softer now. "I'm not taking sides in the whole family war. I just think your daughter's name should not be floating around all afternoon because grown people can't manage their pride." That was close enough to a side for me. "Thank you," I said. She nodded and turned to go, then stopped and looked back once. "One more thing. Owen heard part of it. He asked Brittany if you were mad at him. She said no, but he's not stupid." I watched her walk back to her car, and what struck me was not satisfaction. It was disgust. They had done exactly what they accused me of doing. They had dragged a child into it, just not mine this time. After Monica left, I wrote down everything she had told me while it was fresh. Not in angry language, just names, statements, context. At 5:22, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Holly. "I'm sending you something. Don't react in writing." A screenshot followed. It was from a temporary family thread created that morning for party logistics. I was not on it, obviously. Holly had gotten it from another relative who was no longer enjoying the show. The screenshot showed a message from my mother sent an hour before guests arrived. "Please do not discuss the school misunderstanding unless Evan has already poisoned the room. Today is about Owen, and I will not let one person's instability ruin this for him." Under it, Kyle had replied, "If anyone asks, we're keeping it positive and not feeding his drama." Then Brittany agreed. The kids deserve peace. I stared at the screenshot for a long time, not because it surprised me, because it proved premeditation so neatly. They had anticipated questions. They had rehearsed language. They had named me unstable in writing before the event even started. And all of it had been done under the banner of keeping the kids out of it. I sent the screenshot straight to Daniel. His reply came 8 minutes later. "This is useful. Save original metadata if possible." Useful again. That word kept me from drifting into the emotional swamp they preferred. At 6 o'clock, while Sadie was coloring on the floor and arguing with herself about whether a purple horse could also be a firefighter, my father finally texted me directly. "You should be ashamed of yourself." This family used to know how to celebrate without lawyers and gossip. I looked at the message and felt almost detached from it. The accusation had become so predictable it no longer landed where it was meant to. I forwarded it and did not answer. Then Kyle called. I almost ignored it, but something about the timing made me pick up. "What?" "Happy now," he said. There was noise behind him, not party noise exactly, but the after noise of folding tables, tired children and adults talking too sharply in a room that had not fully emptied. "I don't know what that means." "Don't act dumb," he snapped. People were whispering all day. Brittany's mother left early. Some church people were looking at Mom like she did something criminal. "This is because you made everything formal and weird." I leaned against the kitchen counter and kept my voice flat. "No. It's because your mother cannot stop talking." He laughed bitterly. "God, you really think this is all her?" "No," I said. "I think you help." The silence on the line sharpened. Then he said, "You don't understand what you're doing. Try me. You are blowing up every relationship in this family over a missed party and some school confusion." There it was again. Reduce the facts. Rename the conduct. Make the reaction the event, I said. "Your mother tried to pick up my child without permission. She's been telling people I'm unstable. Today, she apparently told guests I get overwhelmed and can't manage my own daughter. If that blows things up, it's because she lit the match in public." Kyle's breathing changed on the line. "You always do this. You make everything a courtroom." "No," I said. "I make it the record. That's different." He did not like that. "You think screenshots make you right. I think patterns make people obvious." For a second, there was only static and the distant sound of a child laughing somewhere far from the phone. Then Kyle said, quieter now, and somehow uglier because of it, "Mom says you've wanted out of this family for years." I looked at Sadie on the floor, bent over her coloring page in complete peace because she had not been forced into that room. Maybe I just wanted a family that didn't punish me every time I stopped being useful. He swore, then said the thing I had been waiting to hear from one of them, in a form I could actually use. "If you keep this up, don't be surprised when people stop protecting you." I repeated it back slowly. "Protecting me from what?" He hung up. I stood there with the deadline against my ear for half a second before lowering the phone. Another sentence for the file. Another glimpse of the mentality underneath everything. Protection in my family had never meant safety. It meant silence. It meant managing appearances. It meant everyone kept the same version of events alive so no one important had to feel exposed. At 7:10, Holly sent one final text. "They're cleaning up now," Diane cried in the parking lot. Not privately. In full view. I read that and imagined the performance with total clarity. Not because I had seen it, but because I had seen versions of it my entire life. My mother never cried where damage could happen. She cried where witnesses could be selected. A minute later, Holly sent another message. One last thing. Owen's grandmother on Brittany's side asked in front of 3 people why a child's birthday had spent more time on your absence than on the kid opening gifts. Nobody had a good answer. That line stayed with me long after I put the phone down. Not because it was devastating, because it was simple. The whole machine had stalled in the light of one clean observation. That night, after Sadie fell asleep, I sat at the kitchen table and organized the day's screenshots, texts, and notes. Monica's visit, Holly's messages, the logistics thread screenshot, my father's text, Kyle's call summary. I added timestamps wherever I had them and separated direct evidence from verbal reports. Daniel would know what to do with the difference. I just had to keep the line clean. While I was writing, another message came in from an unknown number. You should have let today go. People are starting to ask questions nobody can answer. No name, no signature. Probably someone inside the room who wanted to sound ominous. Maybe a cousin. Maybe a family friend. Maybe my mother through some borrowed phone, though by then she was usually more careful than anonymous drama. I took a screenshot, saved it, and blocked the number. Then I sat there for a long time, with my hands folded over the notebook. For weeks, the story had been moving in one direction. My family spoke, and I was expected to absorb the version they created. They framed, and I defended. They implied, and I clarified. They stirred, and I tried not to drown in it. That Saturday shifted something. Not because a party exploded. It hadn't. Not because someone stood up and exposed them with a microphone. No one did. It shifted because the room finally started doing what my family never expected rooms to do. People noticed that a child's birthday had become a theater for adult grievance. People noticed that my mother sounded less loving the longer she talked. People noticed that Brittany's reasonable tone kept collapsing into contradictions. People noticed that Kyle looked angry in a way that did not fit the story of a hurt father defending peace. People noticed that my absence seemed to matter more to them than Owen's day. That kind of noticing is quiet, but it changes everything. Once people see a pattern, they do not unsee it just because the person responsible starts crying in a parking lot. I closed the notebook, turned off the kitchen light, and stood for a moment in the dark house listening to the refrigerator hum and the faint noise of Sadie turning over in her room. For the first time, I did not feel like I was reacting to the damage as it happened. I felt like they had finally started losing control of who got to name it. After that, things got quiet in a way I hadn't trusted before. Not peaceful at first, just quieter. The kind of quiet that makes you listen harder because you've been trained to expect the next knock, the next text, the next concerned relative calling to ask a question that already has somebody else's answer built into it. For 3 days, nothing happened. No calls from my mother. No late-night texts from Kyle. No careful little messages from Brittany trying to sound reasonable while carrying somebody else's script. Even the group chats stayed dead, which meant one of 2 things. Either they had finally understood the line, or they were regrouping somewhere I couldn't hear. I didn't mistake the silence for surrender, but I did use it. Daniel filed the follow-up notice to the school that week, formalizing what Dr. Holland had already done internally. It wasn't dramatic. No emergency hearing. No deputies at the gate. Just documented instruction that Diane and Russell Parker were not authorized for access, pickup, classroom visits, volunteer contact, or unscheduled appearances involving my daughter. The school acknowledged receipt in writing. Denise from the office sent a short note saying all front desk staff had been updated. I printed that email and added it to the folder. The second practical change was smaller, but it mattered. I switched Sadie from the after-school art club on Wednesdays to a program at the community center across town that my family didn't know about. Not because I thought they were surveilling the old one, because I was done leaving doors half open out of habit. The new center had a pickup code name badges, and one woman at the front desk who looked like she could smell nonsense through drywall. I liked her immediately. At home, I changed routines in ways that would have looked paranoid to people who had never been cornered by polite manipulation. I stopped posting pictures of Sadie online, even the harmless ones. I updated emergency contacts at her pediatrician's office. I put passwords on school and medical files. I turned off read receipts. I archived old family threads instead of rereading them at night, like fresh evidence could somehow become less ugly if I looked at it one more time. Daniel told me those small structural moves mattered more than speeches. He was right. A week after Owen's birthday, his office received a response from an attorney representing my parents. It was exactly as thin as Daniel predicted. The letter was long on tone, short on substance, and full of phrases like concern for continued family connection, emotional overreaction, and unnecessary legal escalation. It accused me of creating barriers where none needed to exist, and described the school incident as a well-intentioned misunderstanding. It also objected to language in Daniel's first letter that suggested harm or confusion to the child. Daniel emailed me the PDF with one line. As expected, I called him that afternoon. So they did get a lawyer. Yes, he said. And their lawyer did exactly what lawyers do with weak facts and emotional clients. He tried to slow things down with dignified wording. Does it change anything? No. It clarifies something useful. What? They know they crossed into a lane where feelings won't cover them anymore. That was true, and hearing it, that plainly settled me more than I expected. Daniel drafted the response while I was still on the phone. He read the outline to me as he typed. No objection to family relationships in the abstract. Clear objection to unauthorized school contact. Direct communication with the child, outside parental consent, and repeated false statements to third parties regarding parental fitness. Willingness to consider future communication only if all contact with the child remained suspended and all adult communication went through counsel for the foreseeable future. No room for side calls, no room for, but she misses us. No room for, we only meant well. He said, this isn't a negotiation over whether they meant it kindly. It's a line around what they did. I approved it. That same week, Holly sent one more packet. Not screenshots this time. Emails. Most were old, and that was why they mattered. They showed the same pattern long before Sadie's birthday ever became a crisis. A forwarded holiday chain where my mother suggested Kyle's family should get main seating because Owen was the future of the family line. A message about a summer reunion where she wrote that Evan always manages things better when he's given a task, as if assigning me labor was a kindness to everybody. Another where Brittany thanked my mother for keeping Evan focused on practical jobs during family events because he gets prickly when he thinks too much about emotional stuff. That line sat with me for a long time. It told me something I had never fully put together before. The role was not accidental. It had been discussed, managed, reinforced. I was not just the reliable one by coincidence. I was the one they had collectively learned to keep useful, slightly separate, and easier to dismiss whenever I asked for the kind of consideration they assumed belonged to Kyle's branch. I sent the emails to Daniel. He called me the next day. These are helpful for pattern, he said, but I want to be careful about how we use them. Family favoritism is ugly. It's not always legally relevant on its own. What matters most is how that favoritism fueled recent conduct toward Sadie and toward you as the parent. That was another reason I trusted him. He never got seduced by the theatrical version of justice. He kept bringing everything back to structure, child impact, and documented conduct. Real life does not collapse on cue. It closes by degree. 2 weeks later, the closure started taking visible shape. The school district sent a formal acknowledgement that unauthorized relatives had been flagged in the system and that any future attempt to remove Sadie without guardian authorization could be treated as interference with school procedures. It wasn't a restraining order. It wasn't criminal. It was something quieter and in its own way more satisfying. Bureaucracy had learned their names. That same Friday, Brittany called from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. Her message lasted 43 seconds. "Evan, please call me back. I'm not trying to fight. I just need to talk to you without everyone else involved." I stood in the kitchen listening to it, while Sadie colored a horse green because she said green felt lucky. I forwarded the voicemail to Daniel and said nothing. An hour later, Holly texted. "Brittany and Kyle had a blow-up. She's angry your mother keeps using Owen and Sadie in the same sentences like this is all one family misunderstanding." I read that message twice. Then another came. Apparently, Monica told her she was done defending the party after hearing what was said. That did not go over well. That mattered less to me emotionally than it would have a month earlier. I wasn't looking for the pleasure of watching cracks appear in there soon. But practically, it mattered a lot. Families like mine survive on total narrative cooperation. The second people inside the structure start refusing their lines, everything becomes harder to stage. The next Monday, my Aunt Linda sent a short email. "I think it may be best if everyone takes time and space. I hope one day this can be healed." I stared at it for a while before archiving it. What struck me wasn't the hope. It was the wording. Not "you all need to do better." Not "your mother owes you an apology." Just time and space. In my family, that counted as an earthquake. A relative had chosen distance over Diane's version of closeness. By then, even my father had gone quieter. That more than anything else told me the room around them had changed. Russell Parker had always thrived on the confidence that family hierarchy would cover whatever came out of his mouth. When he lost that audience, he lost volume. The only person who still tried to punch through the wall was Kyle. He sent texts every few days, each one in a different tone, like he was testing doors. "This is insane. Mom is taking this really hard." Owen asked about Sadie again. "You're teaching your kid to cut people off. At some point you are going to regret this." I answered none of them. Then one Thursday evening, he sent something longer. "You act like you're protecting Sadie, but all you're doing is making sure she grows up without a family. Mom may be difficult, but she loves her. Dad loves her. Brittany loves her. Owen loves her. Everybody knows you've been looking for an excuse to leave since before the birthday thing. You finally found one, and now you get to feel morally superior while destroying every relationship around you." I read it once, took a screenshot, and filed it. A year earlier, that message would have ruined my sleep. A month earlier, it would have thrown me into a loop of self-defense and memory checking. By then, it mostly made me tired for him. He still believed repetition could do what accountability had started to undo. Daniel eventually sent one final communication to their attorney. "Because your clients have continued indirect pressure through family members, despite explicit notice, my client will not be considering any restoration of contact at this time. Any future communication regarding the child should be directed solely through counsel. Any direct or indirect outreach to the child's school medical providers or extracurricular institutions will be documented and addressed accordingly." That was it. No dramatic phrase at the end. No threat bigger than the facts could carry. Just a clean closing of available lanes. Their attorney responded with something brief about regrettable breakdown in family communication and reserving rights. Daniel read it over the phone and said, "Translation, they don't have a move that improves their position." That was when I knew it was over, in the only way things like this ever really end. Not with confession. Not with justice music swelling in the background. With options narrowing until people who built their power on informal access realize the formal world is no longer taking them seriously. Sadie noticed the change before I did. Kids do not measure peace by silence. They measure it by nervous system. She slept more deeply. She stopped asking whether anybody was mad. She quit glancing at my phone when it buzzed. The week after the final letter, her teacher emailed me to say she seemed more focused in class and had been remarkably chatty during center time. That phrase made me smile because chatty was not a complaint for a child who had spent the past month absorbing adults trying to bend reality around her. Her pediatrician noticed it too at a routine visit. "She seems lighter," the doctor said while checking her ears. I almost laughed because lighter was exactly the word. I started therapy that month, not because I was collapsing, but because Daniel had been right when he said structure matters, and I was finally willing to admit that structure also needed to exist inside me. The therapist was a woman named Dr. Singh, who had zero interest in dramatic storytelling and every interest in patterns. On my second visit, she said, "Your family rewarded you for being absorbent. Now they're angry that you're reflective instead." I wrote that down. Sadie started seeing a child therapist as well. Play-based quiet, no leading questions. After the third session, the therapist told me, "She is very tuned in to adult mood shifts. The best thing you can do right now is keep your world boring in the healthiest possible way." So I did. We made Friday pizza night official. We walked by the lake on Sundays if the weather held. I let Sadie pick one flower from the grocery store bucket every other week and put it in the chipped blue vase she liked on the kitchen table. We built ordinary on purpose. My family, meanwhile, kept shrinking from the edges. Holly told me my mother was no longer organizing the church women's seasonal fundraiser. No scandal. No public expulsion. Just a quiet transition to someone with more availability. In suburb language, that meant enough people were tired of her version of events that no one wanted more of it attached to a public role. Brittany stopped appearing in family photos with my parents on social media. Kyle still did, but less often, and always with captions that tried too hard to sound upbeat. Then even those thinned out. Monica sent me one more text in late fall. "For what it's worth, I told Brittany she needs to stop pretending your mother's behavior was normal if she wants any chance at peace in her own house." I answered thanks. That was all. There was no point making allies out of people who still lived inside the orbit. I appreciated the truth where it appeared. I no longer expected loyalty from it. Around Thanksgiving, my mother tried once more. Not directly. Through a card. It arrived in a cream envelope, with my address in her unmistakable handwriting. Inside was a single folded card, with a watercolor church on the front, and one line written inside. "Family can survive a season of pride if someone is brave enough to open the door." No apology. No mention of Sadie by name. No acknowledgement of what she had done. Just another invitation for me to reinterpret harm as mutual stubbornness. I took a picture of the card, added it to the file, and put the original through the shredder. That felt better than any speech I could have given. Christmas was the first holiday I spent entirely outside the old orbit. No strategic brunch invitation. No guilt call. No argument about whose house had hosted last year. Just me, Sadie, a small tree from the grocery lot, cinnamon rolls from a tube because she liked the pop sound, and a neighbor named Mrs. Connolly, who dropped off a tin of cookies and stayed exactly 12 minutes because she understood boundaries instinctively. At one point that morning, Sadie sat cross-legged under the tree opening a puzzle and said, "This Christmas is calm." I looked at her and felt something in me go very still. "Yeah," I said, "it is." She nodded like that was the point. Children should not have to praise calm as if it is a special effect. By spring, the legal file had grown thick enough that Daniel suggested we simply maintain it and stop feeding it unnecessary oxygen. "You have what you need," he said. "Unless there's new conduct, don't center your life around the possibility." That was good advice and harder to follow than it sounded. Hypervigilance doesn't disappear just because the paperwork goes your way. It fades when your body finally believes the world has changed. Mine took time. There were still moments. A car slowing too long near the curb. An unknown number lighting up my phone. A school email arriving at an odd hour. Each one would spark the same internal check. But those moments grew farther apart. Late that summer, almost a year after Sadie's birthday, I ran into my father at a hardware store. He looked older than the timeline justified. Not broken. Just diminished around the edges, like someone had spent too long expecting a room to tilt back in his favor and finally accepted that it would not. He saw me in the aisle with the garden hoses and stopped. For 1 second, I thought he might try to speak. He didn't. His eyes moved to the cart where I had paint sample cards and a box of weed killer. Then he nodded, once the smallest acknowledgement possible between two men who shared blood, and very little else by then. I nodded back and kept walking. Not because it felt powerful, because it felt finished. A few weeks later, Holly sent a brief update. Diane and Russell sold the old house. Downsized to a condo near the highway. Fewer gatherings now. Fewer visitors. Kyle comes by sometimes. Brittany less. I read it, thanked her, and closed the thread. There was sadness in that, but not the kind that invites reversal. Just consequence. Real consequence, the only kind that means anything. Not public humiliation under a spotlight. Not revenge fantasy. Just a life getting smaller after years of treating other people like scenery in the family portrait. On Sadie's 6th birthday, I rented a room at a different place than the year before. Smaller, brighter, nothing fancy. I invited neighbors, 2 school friends, the little boy from the community center, who always traded stickers with her, and my friend Marcus from work, whose daughter adored Sadie's rabbit obsession. Every person who said they would come showed up. That should not have felt miraculous. It did anyway. Sadie wore a paper crown she decorated herself with stars and crooked hearts. She spilled punch on the tablecloth, laughed too hard during the game with balloons, and insisted on helping cut the cake, even though her idea of helping involved holding the knife handle with exactly 0 useful pressure. At one point, she climbed into my lap, while the other kids were tearing into favor bags, and whispered, "This party feels full." I put my arm around her and said, "That's because it is." She thought about that for a second, then asked, "Not because there are more people." I looked at the room. Mrs. Connolly talking to Marcus. 2 kids arguing over dinosaur stickers. A teacher from kindergarten who came by for 15 minutes on her way to dinner with her sister. Noise without tension. Presence without performance. "No," I said, because the right people came. That night, after the wrapping paper and paper plates were in bags, and Sadie was asleep with frosting in the corner of her mouth, I sat alone in the living room and understood something I wish I had learned earlier. The end of a toxic family story does not always arrive as reconciliation, and it does not need to. Some relationships end not because love failed, but because control finally did. Some doors close not out of cruelty, but because you finally understand what keeps walking through them when you leave them unlocked. My mother had always said family shows up. She was right in a way she never intended. Family shows up in the way people treat your child when there is nothing to gain from it. Family shows up in who respects your no the first time. Family shows up in who helps without building a debt ledger in their head. Family shows up in the people who do not need an audience to act decently. The rest is just access, and access, I had finally learned, is not love.